Vastuno Mridu Katinya Lagu Guroshna Shitanam Chagrikshatastva Nirbina Tasyam Roma Maharaho Tatra Chantur Bahirvatas Vachulabda Guno Mrita Vastunaha of all matter, Midyu softness, Katinya hardness, Lagu lightness, Guru heaviness, Oshna warmness, Shatatam coldness, Jirikshataha desiring to perceive, Tvak the touch sensation, Nirbina distributed, Tasyam in the skin, Roma hairs on the body, Mahi Ruhaha as well as the trees, the controlling desires, the controlling deities. Tatra there, Cha also, Antaha within, Bahihi outside, Vataha Tvacha, Vataha Tvacha the sense of touch or the skin, Labda having been perceived, Gunaha objects of sense perception, Vritaha generated. Translation by Srila Prabhupada. When there was a desire to perceive the physical characteristics of matter, such as softness, hardness, warmth, cold, lightness, and heaviness, the background of sensation, the skin pores, the hairs on the body, and their controlling deities, the trees, were generated. Within and outside the skin is a covering of air through which sense perception becomes prominent. Responsively, when there was a desire to perceive the physical characteristics of matter, such as softness, hardness, warmth, cold, lightness, and heaviness, the background of sensation, the skin pores, the hairs on the body and their controlling deities, the trees, were generated. Within and outside the skin is a covering of air through which sense perception became prominent. Purport by Srila Prabhupada. The physical characteristics of matter, such as softness, are subjects of sense perception, and thus physical knowledge is the subject matter of the touch sensation. One can measure the temperature of matter by touching with the hand, and one can measure the weight of an object by lifting it with the hand, and thus estimate its heaviness and lightness. The skin pores, and the hairs on the body are all interdependent with the touch sensation. The air blowing within and outside the skin is also an object of sense perception. The sense perception is also a source of knowledge, and therefore it is suggested here that physical or physiological knowledge is subordinate to the knowledge of the self. As above mentioned, knowledge of self can expand to knowledge of phenomena, but physical knowledge cannot lead to knowledge of the self. There is, however, an intimate relation between the hairs on the body and the vegetation on the body of the earth. The vegetables are nourishment for the skin, both as food and medicine, as stated in the third canto, Tavachcham Asya Vinirbinam Vishnur Dishnam Asadihi. Translation, again by Srila Prabhupada. When there was a desire to perceive the physical characteristics of matter, such as softness, hardness, warmth, cold, lightness, and heaviness, the background of sensation, the skin pores. The hairs on the body and their controlling deities, the trees, were generated. Within and outside the skin is a covering of air through which sense perception became prominent. Mukam karoti vachalam pangum langayate girim yat kripa tarham bande Shri Guru Dinatarane. In the last paragraph of the purport, Prabhupada writes about the relation between the hairs on the body and the trees, or on vegetation on the body of the earth. The vegetables are nourishment for the skin and food and medicine, as stated in the third canto. Vachcham asya vinir binam vivishur danam oshadhihi. It's very difficult to find medicine that's completely chemical and not derived from plants. It's sometimes said that all medicine actually has its derivation from plants, like aspirin comes from the bark of a willow tree and so on and so forth. That's considered a miracle drug. So I think I want to tell a little bit about some of my projects. One of them is a book about milk. It's not exactly a book, it's kind of like a booklet. It's kind of our position on drinking milk. And I don't know what the title is going to be. It's probably going to be something like Cow's Milk is Good for the Health. There have been a number of studies that have been done on this, and some of them are very complex and involve a lot of people, and they're sponsored by universities or sponsored by milk boards and all sorts of people. There's a definite bias in most studies that are about cow's milk, saying that it shouldn't be drunk and that plant-based milk alternatives are a better option. So that's what is between the lines in a lot of these so-called studies that have been made by people in Mexico and Japan and China and all over the world. They use very strange terminology, and one of the things that they talk about are what is called a smart pill. And we were looking this up the other day. What is a smart pill? And there's a picture of it. It's like a little capsule, like a medical capsule, but there's nothing in it except a little metal thing that looks like it's kind of a machine. And apparently that's being used, a smart pill. In case you don't know what a smart pill, that's what a smart pill is, so that they can. And this machine transmits information to a computer or something, a handheld device that's not in the body. So that's the state of the art of medical research. They're using smart pills. It's kind of like the next stage. From a tablet you go to a capsule, and this capsule has a machine in it, and it's passed out through the body later on. That's what they're tracing the different behaviors of bodily symptoms with, smart pills. So now, I think in this country, it's illegal to drink milk that's not pasteurized, or not for humans to consume it anyway. And but it's interesting that in the United States, they sell this unpasteurized, what they call raw milk, and it's legal to sell it. First it was in 5 states, and I think it's now in 11 states it's legal. It includes California, Pennsylvania, and New Hampshire, New Mexico, Arizona, a few places like that. So that's not so bad, because at least the milk that's unpasteurized can be sold for humans to consume. The problem is that it's sold in health food stores, and usually it's refrigerated, and it supposedly loses its potency after some time. But anyway, 11 states out of 50 isn't so bad. It's like it's kind of progressive. It's like a 20% or 1 out of 5 or something like that. So that's a little bit. And then there's another phenomenon called cold-pressed milk, and that's where milk is subjected in machines. And I've seen pictures of these machines. They're sometimes as big as automobiles or trucks. They're usually quite large, and they subject the milk, unpasteurized milk, to high pressure. It's equivalent to the sinking something at the bottom, about 6 times the pressure on the bottom of the ocean, 6 times that pressure. And as you know, there's a lot of pressure as you go deeper into the ocean. And if you go to the bottom of the ocean, it's very intense, and it's 6 times that. And they're selling it now. It's legal because it's not pasteurized. But they say that it kills all the harmful bacteria in milk. So this is part of the study. It's not legal in the United States, but they're trying for it, making it legal in the Federal Food and Drug Administration has to give their approval before it can be sold. But it's sold in this country as milk by the cow. It's called milk. Is that right? Milk by the cow, and it sells for $5.25 per liter, which is a little more than regular, quite a bit more than regular milk. But it's a trend, and they say that it's a way that you can drink unpasteurized milk and all the harmful bacteria is killed. That's the state of medical research today, that you can get milk under high pressure and it's completely raw, it's unpasteurized, and it's okay to drink. So you can go to the supermarket if you want raw milk and buy it in Kohl's. It's cold pressed milk by the cow, it's called. It's cow's milk. Anyway, I'm convinced that putting milk under that kind of high pressure changes the structure, probably very radically, the molecular structure. So it's not drunk here. And I think that milk that's has to be pasteurized to be, but I think that the milk products, I may be wrong about this, but I think the milk products like yogurt and butter and cheese don't necessarily have to be pasteurized, because when you make or cook the milk and you make milk sweets and you make yogurt and other things out of the raw milk, it's legal. It's okay to do that. So that's probably one of the advantages of eating something that's not not drinking milk. And I recently had a conversation with Savas, who's the temple president in Los Angeles. And he was saying that there's a lot of people, and in Los Angeles, where raw milk is legal to be drunk by human beings, you can buy it in health food stores. There's not enough to go around for all the people in his community, hundreds of people, and in living in the New Dwarka community in Los Angeles, but also all around the community. So he's convinced that it's impossible for enough raw or himsa milk to be available for all the people that need milk. And if you go into these supermarkets, you can see that milk is one of the biggest selling items, whether it's homogenized, pasteurized A1 or A2 or whatever it is. It's one of the biggest items. And when I was in England, at Letchmore Heath, at Bhaktivedanta Manor, there was only, it's a little village, and just to the north west of London, and there was only one shop who had newspapers and food and milk, and the only milk they had was called UHT, and means ultimate high pressure, ultimate high temperature. So what they do with ultra high temperature, and it's a very common thing, it's a very common kind of milk, they subject it to very high temperatures, like much higher than pasteurization. It goes something like 200 degrees Celsius. And they sell it in cartons, and it has a very long shelf life. It can be kept on the shelf for weeks or months maybe without deteriorating. And it doesn't taste like milk. I tasted it because it was the only milk we could buy, and it has absolutely no taste. It tastes like what it is. It's just like water, white water with some additives and maybe thickeners and whiteners or something like that. And it's the only kind of milk you can buy in that village. You have to have your own cows. Unfortunately, we had our own cows and we didn't have to drink that kind of milk, but it was pretty tasteless. Ultra high temperature, UHT they call it. On the label it says UHT. Most people don't know what it means, but it's the only milk. And I think the reason that they had that is because they didn't want to pay for refrigerating the cow's milk, because you have to pay the electricity bills when you're using regular cow's milk. So they used what they call ultra high temperature milk. So that was the only milk we could buy. And in putting this paper together, I've noticed that there's a big controversy raging all over the world, but especially in India, over A1 and A2 milk. They call A1 and A2 milk. And there's even some people, some are devotees who say that the A2 milk is so much better that they only drink A2 milk. And recently the Australian Broadcasting Company, I think it's a television station, did a study on A1 versus A2 milk. And they had an expert at the end of their study comment on it, and he's a doctor, a medical doctor, and he said that, well, A milk costs a little bit more than A1 milk, But if you want to spend the extra money, you can do it. But it's hardly any different, really. And he said, his final statement was, he said, if you want to buy the A2 milk, it's your dime. As they say in the United States, it's your dime. In other words, if you want to spend the extra money, you can do it, but it's not going to be very different than the regular milk. And what there's a group of people that come, I think it's on Saturday mornings, that come to Krishna Kirtan to find out about cows and the cow's milk, and they're very surprised that cows can be loved, and that they have a kind of protective nature, bullocks and cows, towards human beings, and that they're domestic animals. Because people buy into the concept of Darwinian evolution, they think that cows evolved from some kind of wild creatures thousands of years ago. But the interesting thing is there's no scientific or medical evidence anywhere that says that cows have evolved. They've been domestic animals for literally centuries, and there's no evidence that they've been anything else. And it's a tradition in parts of the world, especially in India, that milk is boiled before it's drunk. It's such a strong tradition that when someone told me that when Kellogg's cornflakes came to India, which was fairly recent, the problem was that the people who poured milk on it wanted to boil their milk first and have warm milk poured over the cornflakes. But the cornflakes started to get very mushy, and they had to convince people to pour cold milk over the cornflakes so that they would still be crisp. And that was a big marketing problem. But I think for the younger generation, it's not a big issue. They've sort of solved the problem because they customarily drink milk without boiling it, and it's refrigerated milk. So there's nothing wrong with it, but actually it's actually a good safety feature because it's a higher temperature. Boiling milk is at a higher temperature than pasteurization, and because we don't know what kind of grass they ate or what they were eating, like a lot of cows in India, you see them eating newspapers and out of the garbage bins and stuff like that. So boiling the milk has a benefit. I think when Prabhupada was present on this earth, he was informed that they customarily, at that time, it's changed now, but at that time they were customarily putting cod liver oil in milk. It's kind of a fish oil. And the story is that Prabhupada's response was, well, what can we do? We have to offer it to Krishna. So in other words, in Kali Yuga, whether milk is highly industrialized, homogenized, or pasteurized or whatever, it's reasonably safe to drink milk that you buy in the shops, even though it's not possible. I mean, like I every day go down to the Goshala and almost drink the milk right out of the udders, almost. It's within the first 10 minutes of the milk coming out of the cow that I drink it, and and I've been doing it for about a year and a half, and don't have any terminal diseases like tuberculosis. I just don't have those things. And the Raw Milk Society is so aggressive about drinking raw milk, unpasteurized milk, that they say that there was a study done by I think it was Stanford University that said that pasteurized milk has to be pasteurized. If you want to be really safe, you have to drink it as pasteurized milk. And I think even in Gitanagari they pasteurize their milk before they sell it in other states, because like in Illinois it's illegal. So if they want the devotees in Chicago, Illinois to drink it, they have to pasteurize it. But they also send it to states that it's legal in. But it's just difficult not to pasteurize it. They had to comply with a lot of regulations in order to sell it out of state, even though it's legal in Pennsylvania. There's a lot to learn from these people in Pennsylvania, like the Amish community that's nearby. They have a kind of strange rule that you can't use your cell phone in the Amish community. You can't make a phone call because that's bowing to industrialization or the material industrial complex. So if you want to make a phone call, if you were born in the Amish community, you have to go out to a telephone booth, the nearest telephone booth, to make your telephone call. And I don't know if you've ever been there, but in Lancaster County, Pennsylvania, they have these buggies, the horse-drawn buggies. They don't believe in using automobiles. So where do you draw the line between what's wrong with an automobile, what's better about a horse-drawn buggy, and why you should make phone calls on a mobile telephone, and why you should go to a phone? What's the difference? The difference is that it's between what they do and what the people in Gita Nagari do, although they're close by, is that in Gita Nagari they have a philosophy about using everything for Krishna. It's called Yukta Vairagya. If it can be used for Krishna, it doesn't matter if it's a cell phone, an automobile, an airplane, or a computer. If it's used in the right way for Krishna, we have a verse by Rupa Goswami, Nasaktasya Vishayam Yatarham Upayunjita Nirbandha Krishna Sambhada Yukta Vairagya Murtaye. And it's one of the things that really endeared Prabhupada to his disciples, that you could do anything for Krishna. You could drive cars, you could use computers, you could use airplanes, you could use medicine. All sorts of things could be in the Yukta Vairagya process, as long as it was done for Krishna. And that was the main goal. And like Arjuna in the Bhagavad Gita had to actually fight. He was a soldier. He had to do something that was, in a sense, very unpleasant. But he did it for Krishna. And we read about the Raja Rishis, people like Parikshit, having to punish criminals, like he was drawing his sword on a person who was torturing a cow in his country. His country was the whole world, but he was willing to punish the criminals in order to protect the progeny, the local people. So there's, and Prabhupada would even drink or would be offered to the deities the milk that had fish oil in it, because he realized that there's something miraculous happening within the cow, that even industrialized milk has its benefits. And one of the benefits is that if we drink cow's milk, even industrialized cow's milk, the cows are getting good benefit, because actually we're drinking their milk. There's a devotee who lives in Wellington, New Zealand, who's a doctorate. He has a doctorate in whatever, nutrition, I think. And there's about 50 people working under him. And he works in a big dairy called Fonterra Dairy. Fonterra Dairy is such a big dairy that they export their products to places far away like India and China. And their slogan is that texture is the most important aspect of dairy products. Like if you have ice cream, it's melted and it's warm, it has a completely different texture. So it's texture that really matters. That's their slogan, while they're doing all sorts of things to make milk thick and white. And Rashika says that he doesn't even know what kind of milk comes in to the dairy, and they come in trucks. And he doesn't know what kind of animals they come from or what they're eating or what the grass is, but they come in. And he said the only way he can justify his existence is to say that the cows are benefiting, because they are. It's a bit of a weak argument, but it's true. We have to. So Prabhupada made many statements that said that drinking milk is good for the brain. It helps develop the finer tissues in the brain. So this project is to give some nutritional, medical, and scientific information about this. That milk is actually good for the brain from a scientific point of view. It can be determined that cow's milk is actually good for the brain. And I know that there's some people that think drinking milk is anything from the cow is not proper, but they even have admitted that milk from a human mother is beneficial, at least for the first year in life of a child. That's beneficial. So the idea is that drinking cow's milk, even up into old age, is very beneficial for all people, young, old, of any gender, of any race. And there's a principle called lactose intolerance that some people say is the reason that, it's like, for instance, people in certain parts of the world can't drink milk because their genetic makeup makes it impossible. They get diarrhea, they get all sorts of diseases and things like that. But it's sort of countered by the fact that a lot of milk is being sold to China. Probably it's a majority of all cow's milk is being sold now to China, and China exports it, they consume it. And so they're said to be, the people in that part of the world are said to be lactose intolerant, but they're some of the biggest consumers and exporters of milk in the world. So there needs to be some scientific evidence to convince people that it's not an evolutionary thing, and that cow's milk can be consumed by human beings. It's kind of a position paper that we have. It wouldn't be a mass distribution book necessarily, but it would be our position based on studies done by people who have scholarly credentials in nutrition, in neurology, and those kind of sciences. And if it's sponsored by milk boards, well, so be it. I mean, they want to sell more milk, so we want to drink more milk, that's okay. But if it's sponsored by a university, it has the appearance of being somewhat unbiased. It's a kind of study that's finding out facts. So that's what the idea is on this. Anyway, that's one of my latest projects, and it's turning out to be a much bigger, more difficult and expensive project than it first seemed to be. I sent out about 200 letters asking if anyone was interested in this project, leaders and plebeians, people of all description, and only about 10 or 20 people responded. And most of the responses said, well, it's a good idea, we think it should be done, but we don't know anyone that can do it. And one of the people I sent the letter to, was Savas, and someone in his area, a lady, has a PhD in molecular biology, and she's very keen to participate in this project. And another person was the temple, I think he was the temple president, someone in Brisbane, and he put me on to one of his Indian life members who turned out to be a specialist, expert. He worked for Harvard Medical School for some time. He has a PhD. And he drinks raw milk. There's a group of people in somewhere near Melbourne. I think they're people of Indian origin, and maybe they don't do it as good as they do it here because they don't realize that it's a very complicated process. It involves breeding, it involves veterinary work, and you have to have a lot of land to realize how to do it. And you have to know what the breeds are and how to breed animals and how to take care of them. But that guy's been drinking this, and it's raw milk. And in the Salem villages, still in India, people drink raw milk, unpasteurized milk, and they think it's the best kind of milk to have. So there needs to be some scientific proof. That's what I'm getting at, and that's the project, is to show that milk is good for the brain, human brain. I mean, it's probably good for all brains, but I mean, drinking camel milk and goat milk and whatever is drunk is not such a good option, I don't think. I mean, it may have a certain kind of richness and taste. And buffalo milk, which they drink in India, which is pretty rich and butterfat, but almost, by tasting it, you know that there's something wrong there. So if there's any questions, fire away. Yes?
There was one devotee living in Vrindavan years ago, Padmalakshmi, very well. Years ago he developed some sort of blood cancer, and the Ayurvedic doctor prescribed drink 1 litre of raw milk every day. So he was going down to Goswami and doing that every day for 9 months, and the Ayurvedic doctor said, "You're cured, cancer-free."
Yeah, most people in that part of the world think that drinking raw milk is beneficial. There's a book called the Untold Story of Milk, which talks about that, and but there's a kind of a political thing against A2 milk, and people say that all indigenous cows in India are giving A2 milk, and there's a big protest about it because some people they have protests and they make banners and billboards and all that they say that unless the cows are a certain kind of cow, the zebus, the kinds with the big humps and the white ones in northern India, unless they're those kind of cows, it's not good to drink any milk. But I noticed when I was in India that there's a city called Udupi, which is north of Mangalore. It's on the west coast of India, not on the coast but near the coast. And they have they have a Goshala right inside that temple, the Udupi Krishna temple. And the cows are, small, and they're black colored. And the people go into that temple and feed them every day. So it's kind of like a hypocritical kind of protest that they aren't real cows, because people of India go there and they like them. So that's a very good comment. Thank you. Yes? Ajita, you had something to say?
Sometimes when we do those studies, we tend to forsake the historical aspect. And it seems like the bread as well. A lot of people are becoming gluten-free, becoming gluten intolerant. But it seems like with the milk, it's more of a cultural issue, because now we're fighting with whether it should be pasteurized or not, and trying to prove it should be pasteurized. But if you go back historically, the milk was extracted locally drunk locally. And as soon as people migrated towards the cities, there was an issue with transport. So as soon as you bring the transport in, then the authorities start to deal with, expiry dates, etc. And obviously they're going to treat the product in a way that it can last because people are far away. So then immediately you come into a zone where, they're very heavy, like the milk, treating the milk, pasteurize it because they don't want people to get sick because we don't know how far it's going to go. And sometimes the milk, even in Itanagari, it's transported from the farm to the town 2 hours and then it's flown to Boston, it's flown to Chicago. And to do that, then they require to be pasteurized. But if you go back historically and culturally, where the setting was, living in the village, like you said in India, they drink the milk like we do here, then immediately we can bring the non-pasteurized milk, the raw milk, immediately. And it not only is very good for your health, but it obviously doesn't have any side effects. And they had the same issue with the bread. When people started becoming gluten intolerant, is when before the bakers used to go the day before, start making the dough and let the dough rise many times, which was digested by the enzymes themselves. And then when people took that bread, it was easy to digest. But now they go at 5 o'clock in the morning, and by 7 it's on the shelf. And the flour didn't have time to go through the process of things. So every time now we're dealing with things like that, we look historically, unfortunately, sometimes it's not done. Then we end up with a cultural issue rather than the tip of the iceberg.
Yeah, it just goes to show, underlying what you just said, is that industrialization, when it came into being, electricity, refrigeration, and all that, and airplane travel, it's just there are aspects of it that are important that we have to use, but actually the cultural historical record shows that if in a sort of less populated area, you could drink raw milk and it was beneficial. So all glories to New Govardhana. Yes.
Krishna, I find it a very interesting topic and I seem to have a lot of questions. So what's just coming up after Judy, because also when they brought electricity to the villages, everybody got sick. So it's almost like the more advanced we get in technology, the worse it is for us, and that's why the world is sort of upside down at the moment. But you were saying that, you were saying that Srila Prabhupada was into us using everything in Krishna's service, but that's for the that's also not good for the whole world, all these things. So how do we feel about that?
Well, I think the Yukta Vairagya principle is that if it's used for Krishna, it can be okay. And if it's not used for Krishna, which is what's happening in most of the world, in 99.9% of the world, or whatever it is, it's wrong. I mean, they're playing loud music on the main streets, and it's obnoxious, actually. But they think it's wonderful. And because they're so enamored with the glitter of the world, especially that we can make phone calls all around the world at the touch of a button, we can live an extra 20 years by going into the hospital, or 30 years, but we can't stop death. And we can travel to the other side of the world in a matter of hours, and they think that's really wonderful. And everything is going forward. It's getting better. But it's actually getting a lot. We know that, as Prabhupada wrote in the beginning of the Srimad Bhagavatam, that there's a pinprick in the world at large. The pinprick is the fact that it's all wrong, and the doomsayers are saying that even financially things are going to eventually collapse, and that the thing can't go on the way it's going on. And a similar thing happened in the former Soviet Union when Marxist Leninist communism became prominent. Prabhupada went there during that time, but he predicted almost to the day when people would all collapse, and it did. In 1991 or thereabouts, it became democratic, and that still was not the best thing. That's also going to collapse. It's collapsing at the moment. But the Yukta Vairagya principle is that we have to use technology. I mean, we can use technology. We can use cars. We can use cell phones. As long as it's for Krishna, it's okay. So that's the difference.
I wanted to make a comment. There is a milk called Cleopatra bath milk.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I've heard of it.
Yeah.
So they can't sell it legally in this country, as far as I know, to human beings for consumption, but they can use it. They can sell it for use on animals and for people to bathe in. That's why they call it Cleopatra milk, because apparently she used to bathe in milk. Anyway.
And I just wanted to confirm with myself, so what you were saying about the different types of breeds of cows, it doesn't really make any difference?
Well, not really. I mean, cows, there's a kind of a miracle in the production of milk by cows. They have, I don't know if you know the physiology of a cow, but they have 3 stomachs, and whether their milk is industrialized or not afterwards is kind of immaterial, because there's a miracle in milk no matter what breed they come from.
Thank you.
So that means even their condition, what they're eating wouldn't matter?
It does matter what they eat, but they have a kind of automatic kind of way of eating. Even stuff they eat is a little toxic. They have a way of purifying it. I don't know much about the physiology of them, but based on what they eat and what they're fed and what the grass is like, and like. That's one of the reasons why they boil milk in India, because they're eating newspapers and eating out of the garbage bins. Because, it definitely affects their everything.
Well, I feel like the consciousness of the cow too, because it's going through so much trauma, it loses its baby, it's killed, and that's giving milk, and I feel that's in the milk, and that has an effect on us as well.
Well, there are people who disagree with the philosophy that you shouldn't drink cow milk on the basis of how cruel we are treating the animals. And it's true that they are treated in a very cruel fashion. Most of them are just thought of as units. They're not thought of as being living beings. And the treatment is very bad. I've even known people that have refused to drink it because of that reason. It's not that the milk isn't good, but I mean, that's kind of extreme, but they don't drink it because of the way the cows are treated. I was reading about the slave trade in England, and I don't know if you know much about Philadelphia, but Philadelphia is sometimes called a city of brotherly love. Philo means love in Greek, and Delphia has something to do with the demigods or God. But anyway, the point I was getting to was that even in that state where raw milk is legal to sell, people are unclear about what its use is for. And even though the people can buy it, they still don't know what it's all about, and they tend, as time goes on, they tend to believe that cows have evolved from wild creatures in the forest. So what was your question?
It's more to do with also the consciousness, like the mother cow's getting her milk, but she's getting the babies killed, and she gets killed. She's just a slave.
Yeah, what happens with a lot of people don't even drink raw milk, because after that raw milk is gone, the cows are just turned over to the slaughterhouses.
But doesn't the consciousness, when we offer to Krishna, the consciousness change?
Supposedly, that's what you can argue, that it's even because of the consciousness changing in the cows, because they don't know necessarily that we're drinking their milk, that the devotees are drinking their milk, they're benefiting. It's kind of like agyata sukriti, they're making spiritual advancement, unknowingly.
I've also heard that by offering your vegetables to Krishna, it gets rid of poison, because Prahlad Maharaj offered everything.
That's true. And that's one of the reasons why Prabhupada said it was all okay to offer milk. It even had some fish oil in it to the deities, because it would get purified.
Thank you, Maharaj.
Thank you. Hare Krishna. So I think we'll end here. Thank you. Hare Krishna. Srimad Bhagavatam ki jai.